So that's what Donald Trump and any US president are dealing with. And they're all cowed. They all just completely crumble in front of Netanyahu, who is absolutely ruthless. It's exerting power through manipulation and fear inside the United States and inside the Oval Office. And you don't think that Trump is frightened?
Max Blumenthal just revealed that Donald Trump is afraid of Benjamin Netanyahu, and in this clip, he explains why he believes that, some of the power dynamics at the heart of the U.S.-Israeli relationship, and what that means for American politics in a time where many people, especially young people, are fading away from the Israel First doctrine. So let's get right into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
You said to us at that time, and you said elsewhere, that you think that Trump is afraid of Israel. Since then, since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, you've doubled down on that claim. Can you please explain to our audience again why you say that?
Well, first of all, those lines you read were corroborated days after I reported them by Vice President J.D. Vance, who was seated in Charlie Kirk's chair hosting his show after his death. He said that Charlie Kirk did go to the White House and lobbied against striking Iran. He didn't have the details I had on Trump, but he probably was there, but didn't want to embarrass Trump. But of course Trump was afraid. Of course Trump is completely controlled and cowed and cucked by Netanyahu. That's why Netanyahu, according to Tucker Carlson, someone who's much more connected than I am to Trump world, said that Netanyahu is running around the region bragging about controlling Donald Trump. I mean, Netanyahu said this openly about the U.S. before, or at least he said it in private, and the video was leaked in 2001. He was bragging to a small group of settlers in a sort of, and he didn't, I don't think he knew he was being filmed. He said the U.S. is a thing you can move easily.
Yeah, in that video, which is still available online, he says turn off the camera before he says that. So the duplicity is just in front of everyone to see. And Max is right. This is the dynamic of the U.S.-Israeli relationship and the influence that Israel has in U.S. politics. And he's also right about Charlie Kirk talking to Trump, saying don't go to war with Iran. Don't follow the same path paid by the neocons. That is not what Zionism Inc. wanted to hear. They wanted regime change in Iran. This was also corroborated by Tucker Carlson, and it was reported at the time.
So this is textbook Netanyahu. How does he control Washington? Through AIPAC, they control the Congress. They control media through assets, cutouts like Larry Ellison. They're controlling Trump through Miriam Adelson. They're controlling Marco Rubio through Paul Singer, his largest donor, who is just a neocon representing Israel. Ike Perlmutter, longtime donor to TPUSA, also big donor to Trump. He's another pro-Netanyahu donor. Ron Lauder. There's so many of them. Actually, if you're watching this now, you can look up Netanyahu's millionaire and billionaire list, and you can find online a handwritten list of millionaires and billionaires inside the United States that Netanyahu uses personally. He personally wrote this list up to exert control over U.S. politicians.
Certainly so. That's what we see in Larry Ellison, the first name on the list that he just rattled off there, is a major partner in the purchase of TikTok right now. The TikTok acquisition is Larry Ellison, a diehard Israel firster. He's going to buy TikTok. And hey, the reason that they wanted that banned, by the way, in the United States, ostensibly they said, oh, the reason's China. China's going to steal our data. No, it was because videos and pictures were leaking out of Gaza, showing the genocide on full display for Americans to see in 4K for the first time. You know, the kind of footage that we didn't get out of Vietnam and Iraq. This is what's moving Americans' opinions on this, and they want to shut that down. And that's who you have buying TikTok now, so watch out for censorship there.
But then there's the assassination factor. Donald Trump has faced 2 assassination attempts. The trial of one of his would-be assassins, Ryan Routh, just wrapped up. And with very little fanfare or media interest, Routh was sentenced to life in prison, tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen before he went to prison. None of his links, direct links to Ukraine, were mentioned. Ryan Routh was recruiting for Ukraine's International Brigade in Kiev. He had had meetings with the Helsinki Commission on Capitol Hill. This is strange, and none of it is mentioned today. And we scarcely ever hear about the first assassination attempt, which missed Trump's head by a few millimeters in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Max is totally right about this. Max actually broke this story because shortly after Ryan Routh was apprehended, it came out that he had a self-titled book, not self-titled, self-published book on Amazon. You can still buy it right now. It's called Ukraine's Unwinnable War, in which he talks about how this is an existential war for civilization. He was ostensibly, according to the official narrative, totally poor, but also offering people large sums of money to be recruited into the Ukrainian army to fight against Russia. In this book, he also praises the Syrian Liberation Army, which was the CIA's cutout in Syria, kind of their choice faction that they wanted to rule Syria. You can take a look at all sorts of things related to the Syria war, with the U.S. siding essentially with ISIS and Al-Qaeda through Operation Timber Sycamore to depose Assad, but he praises that faction in here too. Just wild stuff about that this story was completely buried. And we still don't know much about Thomas Matthew Crooks, right? What do we know about him? He had basically zero social media presence, like no political activism, according to the official narrative. All these stories get so buried, and it has to be because the intelligence community and the propaganda apparatus don't want us to know the truth. These are huge stories that journalists would cover in a free society, but it's only people that are true journalists, like Max Blumenthal, doing it. Certainly not Don Lemon and Rachel Maddow, that's for sure.
And now there's a third major assassination that took down Trump's top, I would say, like his top activist operating in the field, someone who is on his way, on a trajectory towards running for the presidency, probably would have gone into the Senate or been a governor at some point. And you don't think that Trump is frightened? I mean, the whole 1% right now is frightened of the adventurous violence that's unfolding. Luigi Mangione scared the financial elite. Steve Bannon actually gave a speech or participated in a panel speaking to some Silicon Valley, I think a Silicon Valley audience, or it might have been in Aspen, but I think it was in Silicon Valley. And he basically said this guy Luigi Mangione just walked up and killed some healthcare executive, and they're just going to come for you, and MAGA will protect you from them. That's why you need to support Donald Trump, because we will protect the rich from the violence of the left. And
yeah, I mean, these are the divisive tactics to divide and conquer the populace, pit us against our neighbors, while they continue the endless wars and Palantir surveillance schemes and the extortion apparatus and the perversions of the Fourth Amendment, violations of due process, the mass extortion apparatus in the forms of both the IRS and the CIA. That all continues while we fight each other. They want us more than anything to hate our neighbor on the left and on the right. That's what they do. That's the entire scheme. That's the entire propaganda perspective of the regime. Well, you know what? I'm not going to hate my neighbor. I'm going to love my neighbor. And that's a message that the best dissidents in the world always say about this, because you have to see through the wool that they're trying to pull over Americans' eyelids.
So that was their message for months. And then, I mean, they can't even protect their own guy. He's like hunted in public, shot down in the most dramatic way possible. His security team seemed to have no way of preventing it. Imagine a US president angering a figure as powerful as Netanyahu, who commands assassins around the globe. What would go through your head if you decided to withhold weapons to Israel?
Bullets, probably, right? Bullets.
And adamantly refused any of their lobbying machinations. What would they do? How would they stop you? And what would happen if the weapons stopped coming? For them, it would be existential. They believe they would no longer be able to survive. So I think Donald Trump understands this, but this is also something that I've been told by people who know Trump, who've been close to him. And I've known for years that he believed there would be assassination attempts on him, not necessarily from Israel. So I believe this is in his mind. And I also heard from someone who has very good access into the White House, inside the White House. And I've talked about this for the past week or so. I've been talking about it for like 2 weeks, that during one of Netanyahu's visits to Washington, or possibly during two earlier this year, agents of Israel placed electronic devices on the emergency response vehicles of the Secret Service, which would presumably respond to an attempt on the president's life. And the Secret Service found them. And I thought, this could be crazy, and I should consider whether I'm just being like fed some kind of conjecture or some hearsay. But there's a clear precedent there.
Yeah, there is, and there is a precedent in the United States with this, too. If you look at this, Israel was accused of planting mysterious spy devices near the White House in 2019. Politico actually picked up and reported on this story. And what you have here was a story talking about this, and the funniest part of this is, but unlike most other occasions where flagrant incidents of foreign spying have been discovered on American soil, the Trump administration did not rebuke the Israeli government. What do you know? This was in Trump's first term, and there were no consequences for Israel's behavior. What do you know about that, man? That says it all. So yeah, Max is completely right. In the incident regarding the vehicle, that was reported and that story was buried quickly, but there's precedent for this. There's precedent.
When in 2019, 3 former senior US officials who had been Trump officials, one of them might have even been like John Bolton. No, it wasn't Bolton, but 3 like national security officials went to Politico and said that Israel had placed Stingray devices. These are cell phone surveillance devices in and around the White House to spy on Donald Trump's cell phone communications. The NSA has concluded that Israel is the greatest spying threat to the US. In 2017, British former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he was British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, in his memoir, wrote that Benjamin Netanyahu had used his personal toilet, and afterwards, his security detail found a listening device placed in the bathroom.
Yeah, this is true too. This story was actually widely reported at the time too, Politico carrying it here. Netanyahu personally bugged my bathroom. Boris Johnson suggests this was just Benjamin Netanyahu using the bathroom, not kind of an Israeli intelligence figure. And this was a major story too in 2024. This was just a year ago that this happened. Again, another story that's been buried largely in the American media to protect the Israel First mantra. The Israel First doctrine that dictates and seems to control our U.S. political class, where Netanyahu waltzes into Congress, delivers a speech, and gets more of a rousing response than the president. That's where we're at with this kind of thing. So Max is totally on point with this. And all these stories, again, would be huge blockbuster stories for any journalist that's worth a salt to truly report on, truly get to the bottom of. But they don't. Why? It's because they're in the bag for the Zionist project, for the Greater Israel Project, for bankrolling the genocide in Gaza, for empire building in the Middle East, at the peril of U.S. forces in the Middle East, by the way, that should just be withdrawn. Get out of that stupid entangling alliance completely. That's what I have to say.
By Netanyahu personally. And you have to start wondering, based on the Politico report, who could get access to the White House to place Stingray devices. It's not just any random Israeli agent. There are people who get access through Netanyahu.
Yeah.
Or through high-level Israeli visitors. So that's what Donald Trump and any U.S. president are dealing with. And they're all cowed. They all just completely crumble in front of Netanyahu, who is absolutely ruthless. So I started reporting this 2 weeks ago, about these listening devices on the Secret Service vehicles. I was just in New York, and we can talk about this, for the UNGA, the UN General Assembly, and it was the most militarized I've ever seen New York, probably since 9/11, but period. I've been around several UNGAs, and I've never seen it that militarized. Like Amnesty International had a meeting, and there were snipers on the roof outside. The meeting I was in yesterday was just teeming with security, which we'll talk about. But leading up to the UNGA, the Secret Service found thousands of SIM cards containing spying devices in order to spy on diplomats' phones, as well as listening devices placed around the area.
What Max is referring to is Netanyahu just spoke to the UN General Assembly, and this is happening as a precursor to that too, with all this following. And it's not unprecedented too that Israel spies on the United States. Jonathan Pollard spied for Israel in the United States in the intelligence community. He was found and apprehended and jailed for that, sentenced for that. And he gave information that he ascertained from the US government to Israel, which was given to the Soviet Union, by the way. This, again, is widely reported. It's going to sound to some people like this is a conspiracy theory, but this is the fruits of the Israel project. The U.S. relationship with Israel, it's tarnished, it's toxic, it's vile, and the U.S. needs to be freed from it completely. Free America from Israel. I love this shirt. I have to show it off, but that's what I think.
Now, who would have been responsible for that? Could it have been the Israeli government and its leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, who just a week before, speaking to state lawmakers from the U.S. in Jerusalem, said, Israel is inside your phone? Of course, he meant it in a different way, that Israeli technology has revolutionized the cell phone, but there was a strong tinge of irony to his comments, considering how much surveillance he's applying to a government that claims to be Israel's most unshakable ally. Israel's not an ally. It's ruling through manipulation and fear inside the United States. It's exerting power through manipulation and fear inside the United States and inside the Oval Office, and it's surviving through continuous genocide in its own region.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if there's one issue that I believe that left-wing and right-wing dissidents can and should unite on, at all costs, setting aside other differences that they might have, it is the Israel issue. It is how beholden our criminal government is to Israel and how much of a vile role that plays in American foreign policy. It's the kind of role that the founding fathers explicitly warned against walking the path toward, that entangling alliance empire building project that has never fared well for republics throughout history in Rome and in other places. That's the path that our ruling class is following. It's a path of destruction. It's a path to perdition. It's a path to hell. And it's because of the Israel lobby. It's AIPAC's influence in Congress, buying off representatives, them boasting about how pro-Israel they are compared to their primary opponents, and then winning on that basis because of how much money flows into their pockets. It's the president being paid $100 million by Miriam Adelson in the last election, being paid more millions by Sheldon when he was alive. It's appointing cabinet level members that are completely beholden to Israel. Kash Patel, Mike Waltz when he was there, Marco Rubio, Mike Huckabee, all these people. That was the ultimate litmus test for Trump's cabinet. If you haven't been paying attention, it's how Zionist they are. They could disagree on some other issues compared to Trump and the MAGA coalition, but on that issue, they had to be in lockstep. But so I think Max is so right in so many places here. The only reservation I have to say is that, yeah, it does seem like in many cases, Trump is afraid to defy Netanyahu, to truly go against Netanyahu. Sometimes there'll be rhetoric about it that's not really followed up with actions, about, oh, he was so upset with Israel for violating the ceasefire that he orchestrated with Iran. And then the next day, the money keeps flowing, right? It's just there for optics to make it seem like this isn't just a one-track relationship where there's only one beneficiary. And even that, it's hard to claim, according to if you're an Israeli dissident, that it's actually a benefit to Israel for the U.S. to keep pumping in money and for Israel to keep getting involved in wars and enacting a genocide in Gaza, trying to expand the West Bank settlements in Syria and Lebanon, bombing Yemen, bombing Iran, bombing Qatar, taking out diplomats recently. But what I wanted to say here is there are some things I think that are fair to add for context here. And sometimes I think that Trump is so erratic with his words and just shoots from the hip that in some ways it seems like he's not afraid whatsoever. And I just want to put this out there as a counterpoint, take it for what it is. But here's a case. Remember a few months ago, this is in April, where he sat down with Netanyahu in the White House. And by the way, Netanyahu has been to the White House, I think 4 times now in Trump's presidency. It seems like he's been there more than Trump, because it seems at some points like he's more of a U.S. president than Trump. But here's what Trump said about Gaza and the idea of the U.S. taking it over. This doesn't seem too afraid of Netanyahu right here.
Having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing. Because right now, all it is for years and years, all I hear about is killing and Hamas and problems. And if you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom zone. You call it the freedom zone.
You can see Netanyahu just not really expecting this to be said. So all I'm getting at here is sometimes Trump does not seem totally afraid, and then other times he does. It might be part of Trump's personality, but that's what we get out of this relationship. It's just so odd and striking without any kind of historical precedent where, a world superpower subsidizes this other country to the point that that country exerts more influence over the mother country that's funding it than the mother country exerts over it. That it truly is that dynamic. Mearsheimer talks about it a lot. John Mearsheimer wrote the best book on this called The Israel Lobby in 2008, I believe, with Stephen Walt. Fantastic book. But that's where we're at. I do want to hear from you, though. Let me know down below. Do you agree with Max